I just think it's interesting. Earlier in our conversation today, we were talking, I think, a little bit about how like people take you or like say your stand up sometimes, and they maybe dismiss you who you are maybe as a filmmaker or as and maybe dismiss is too harsh of a word, but just meaning like, you know, like, oh, Cameron, he's, you know, whatever they want to think about you, but like kind of caricaturize you by that stand-up persona. And so I can relate to that. I was thinking about like when from doing improv, I'm an idiot, and that's part of like feel like, you know, as an improviser when I'm on stage, it's fucking the moment I start going on stage, I'm not John Ripley, you know what I mean? I'm John Ripley as my shtick, as my improviser. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I've done that for a long time, and that's just how I like to perform. You know what I mean? And you know, sometimes people attribute that to me, I think, in real life. You know what I mean? And I can be dismissive of you as like a dumbass, and I get a kick out of it. You know, I just like, cool. You know, because I've had an experience talking about you with other people. I don't have a good enough memory to remember any details, but just being like, people being like, oh, Cameron's kind of a, you know, nut with his anti-comedy and his weird movies. You know, oh, Cameron, you know, Cameron doing Cameron, and I just like, you know, that's a stupid person in my opinion, because I agree. Like, I know you on what I see you as is one of the conversations that we have, you know what I mean? As somebody who's pretty introspective and thoughtful, you know what I mean? You have, you know, a lot of people, a lot of people would say your comedy's fucked up. You know, I mean, that would be a word they would use.
Yeah, and I would agree with that.
Yeah, and in some capacity, yeah, of course. But it's, you know, I don't know. I basically repeating what I'm trying to say is that, you know, people can't get past their first impression of you, I guess.
I agree with that. And in fact, I think that's been a thing that's come up a lot in these stand-up conversations. Because, like, on one hand, I think there are just the people that haven't had the chance to get any other information or experience with me to prove that sort of reductionist thinking wrong. Yeah. Right? Like, you've had plenty of opportunity to have like real human, deep conversations and behind the scenes interactions with me where, you know, that's your reality. Is like, yeah, that's an aspect of Cameron, but he's mostly someone that's like a human to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Where, like, you know, there's plenty of people that can easily just, they only see me for the 4 minutes I go up and then see the, you know, the few seconds of me trying to avoid talking to anyone on stage while I'm there. And then I could totally understand how that can, and then, you know, I've told a story about how, like, when I first started, I was 17, and like Mike Van Vliet came to me months later and was like, this whole time I thought you were a piece of shit, but now I've gotten to know you and like I really like you, and I just wanted to tell you that. And I feel like I've had lots of moments like that where people come around, but where I was getting to is there's also people that I feel like do know me well enough to know, no, it's not anti-comedy, it's not shock value, I'm not intentionally tanking the energy of the room, I really do love stand-up, I respect this art and I'm very passionate about it. But they think, like Lou Morganti is a good example. He does not trust that I am doing my best on a showcase. And like, if I do a joke that tanks the energy of the room, his assumption is that's Cameron doing that on purpose. He knows what he's doing because he has no skin in the game. And I'm like, and I've had this conversation with him directly a number of times where I'm like, and like the most recent sort of confrontation about that, it clicked with me. I'm like, damn, like, I feel like you should know by now. Like, I feel like we know each other well enough for you to understand that's not the case. But even me thinking that and feeling that way, I'm seeing and understanding that isn't. Like, I'm understanding you don't trust me like that. This is how you see me, despite how well I think we know each other. And that's disappointing. And I don't, it doesn't seem like there is any way for me to convince you with my words or prove to you with my actions that isn't the case.
Maybe you can't, you know what I mean? You're not right for his, you know, cause like sitting here and like, and from my own perspective, you know, like obviously, but like I can see a little bit where Lou's coming from. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And again, I understand these things. Like I understand why people have this perspective.
Yes.
But it's impossible for me to get some of these people to understand. When I had this kind of argument with like Timmy and Amy about put me at the club and whether that is just at open mic or having weekend shows and stuff. There's constantly these conversations. Like you have to dial it back. It's like, okay, I can do that. I understand to play ball. And then there's these times where it's open mic. Where it's like, no, this has always been the place for you to experiment and try what you want. You're obviously trying things for the first time in stand up. You don't know until what works until you do it. Yeah. And so then it was getting in this murky area where they're saying like, we don't want to tell you what you can and can't do, but we are trying to run a business. And in my head, I'm like, okay, but I'm not sitting by myself before these shows going like, all right, how can I damage the business and walk people? I'm not thinking that. I'm like, the same way. It's like, what are the taboo subjects? All right. Okay. How can I make a great joke out of that? Like, what's the first iteration? Where do I start? Where do I find out where they pull back, where I can get a laugh in this? And then I go experiment and I try this. And that's what I have to do. I have to be willing to fail and I have to be able to fail, especially in the open mic context, a number of times. Because that's what even like the big comedians do. Like Louis C.K., when he fucking has a new hour, he has to go bomb a bunch of times and figure out where the joke is. And I think that they're in a lot of these folks like Timmy, Amy, Lou, were in this scenario where it's like, of course, they're not going to say, hey, don't do this subject, or this subject ever here where you're under our roof. But at the same time, they're like implying, what you're doing and you're doing it. So just stop doing
what your
that.
intention is.
Right. And I don't know how to convince them like, no, I really am like, it seems to me that the thing to do is to stop taking risks while I'm here.
I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I don't think anyone knows.
I'm thinking about as you're in knowing you and like
it's a sticky situation.
Because seriously, dude, it's so like you're talking about this and I'm having these thoughts and I'm thinking about like, okay, like you're somebody, right, who is my friend but I don't hang out with you very often, right?
Right.
We get together and like have a conversation or whatever, and we always have interest, like we're just like now. But then I don't see you or really ever talk to you. But then I do hear about you or hear about, did you hear about Cameron did this? Did you hear, and Lou's pissed at him about this or whatever it was. I'll catch some wind of this stuff every once in a while or hear, different people, we'll be talking. And just from like hearing these things and the anti-comedy things and like, so it gets into be like the psychology of Cameron Smith. And I can still like, even finding myself falling into the trap of like, sometimes I worry about Cameron because like this darkness, you know what I mean? And I like myself. And then when I see you and we interact and talk and it's you know what I mean? Then I'm like,
kind of dissolves.
Of course, totally.
Yeah.
And so it's very, it's so weird. It's it's
imagine being on this end of it.
Sometimes like literally I hear these things and like just see this not never from what our like face to face how like it all should be, but in this day and age where we have social media, and social media, but but just
social media
and just these things, and people all start, we'll have something about Cameron and then we'll get on her, like people will be like telling Cameron Smith stories, you know what I mean? And I'll be like, the one, like the time that you came to the studio and got the pig costume or whatever it was to go to that whole thing. And I was telling like Bridget about it or something and Steve, and I was just like, man, yes. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know, man, I don't know what this guy's doing,
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's funny how you can take snippets from people, right? I'm sure that we all do it for other people, and you know what I mean? You it's the distance we have between ourselves or whatever. So you allow the craziness in your mind to, I think about this all the time about perception versus reality, you know, and I mean, perception is reality, but you know, how your perception in your head, if you get too caught in your head, you know, you can find yourself, at least in my mind, where I'm like obsessing over things and thinking about things where that I'm like, they become more singularly focused and they affect everything, you know? And I realize that now my reality is like, I'm being delusional, you know what I mean? In a negative way.
Right.
And being cognizant of those, of like, oh, I'm in my head big time. You know what I mean? Like I know when I'm in my head, but also, I don't know. It's like just being able to detach yourself from your thoughts and your emotions, I guess, a little bit.
Right.
And just do like a check-in of like, how am I really feeling right now? And is what is bothering me, or maybe a feeling of stress, anxiety, anger, whatever it is, the negative feeling. And maybe you should even do it when you're happy. But, you know, thinking about like, oh, wait, this is just something that's coming from inside my mind.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That's become important to me because I feel like I'm starting to feel, through the course of the last 25 years or whatever, my adulthood, you know, becoming more, you know, they say you become more comfortable with yourself. At least some people do. I feel like I have, you know, accepting who I am.
Yeah.
And then trying to feel like, you know, I have the issues I deal with this, with whatever, you know what I mean? That in my human experience that make me, you know, whatever cause me stress, and just whatever it is, and thinking about like, why am I feeling the way I'm feeling right now? And if it's a negative thing, because a lot of times I get, you know, I deal with anxiety and depression, and it's, you know, I've learned how to deal with it and have less anxiety and depression in my life. And, you know, like, I'm being easier on yourself, you know what I mean? Don't judge yourself harshly, you know?
Yeah. And I think, I mean, we could go down a real deep rabbit hole there. I mean, like, I typically do talk
like a
about
word salad. I felt like right
mental
there.
health stuff. Well, like, I think the only other thing I wanted to say on the train that we were on, and then I'm happy to go down this other path, but and then I think this overlaps too with that point about like judging yourself or whatever. I think that's one of the things about me that I feel like, you know, because we can talk about, oh, you know, my comedy visits a lot of taboo subjects and people just don't want to associate that. But I think the deeper thing there that's kind of the common denominator with all of it, because like I you know, people have often described me based on the art, like Cameron's someone who doesn't give a fuck, but I don't feel that way. I feel like I do give too much of a fuck in a lot of cases and areas of life.
Yeah.
But I do think there's one area I seem to obviously not give a fuck about. And I think it's my image. Like you're talking about, this thing is when you're hearing the stories and there's like this abstract amalgamation of, well, sometimes I worry about Cameron. It's that, like, that's man, the image. That's the image.
Anyone could be a mass shooter. I would say Cameron.
Right.
That's terrible. And sorry, but
oh no, I you know, that same thought is like I play with that in stand-up where I'm talking about like, oh, I look like a fucking serial rapist, mass shooter,
yes, of course.
But like, and that's it. It's like I let my image be whatever it's gonna be as a result of me behaving the way that I choose to behave. And so like whatever gets made, and then I hear feedback, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna play with that. I'm gonna fuck with, oh, they think I'm a fucking mass shooter. How would I make jokes about that? You know?
Yes.
And
I get it.
You know, and like, oh, you know, with the pig costume thing, it's like this girl already thinks I'm fucking crazy, or like this would just be silly to show up as this, and and I think that there, especially in the modern day of social media, people really work themselves up into fits of anxiety and depression because they put so much weight on their image, like trying to construct this thing that you really kind of don't get a whole lot of control in, and
controlling the narrative.
Yeah, trying to control your image and control your narrative. It is a anxiety inducing thing because there's so many elements that are outside of your control. And if you try to grip that, you're setting yourself up for constant disappointment and frustration and fear and negative adverse reaction to it. And I think that that's the little like nuanced level that I've been picking up in my more like recent lesson learning years is like, I think it's the people that really care about their image are the ones that I'm unable to collaborate with and unable to have good relationships with, because I am such a threat to their world. Like, I'm really bad for their world. I am damaging to someone's image potentially to be associated with me or to work on one of my things with me that may be something that later they're going to ask me to delete or take off the internet or something like that.
I can only dream that I have to. I would never worry. I don't give a fuck about, you know what I mean? Like I've made a lot of shit where people, if people ever actually watched it in any great number, they'd be like, there'd be plenty to be like, this is fucked up, or whatever, you know what I mean? And I don't care, I would love to have that problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, and for the most part, people we're dealing with, as far as success as artists, they're not having it. You know what I mean? I mean, I do believe in, quantifying success on your own terms or whatever, something, you know what I mean? But like people who are like part of a local open mic comedy scene that are worried about it being associated with another fucking guy who's an open micer. No one gives a fuck, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like people really, it just baffles me how much people think people care,